Hello, everybody. Sorry for that little rough start there. No one dies alone. Recently, in my institution, we were trying to think, or the issue has been brought back up about our No One Dies Alone program. We've had it for several years, 10 years. It goes off and on because of volunteers commitment, and volunteers who would want to sit with a dying person, so that the pool gets limited as well, and it's usually been running out of the volunteers department. But recently it came up to be another issue and kind of revamp, especially during COVID-19, when families aren't able to be there as they pass away, or at least the ones that are unexpected. In a lot of institutions, families are able to come in, say their goodbyes, and leave, and usually they pass away rather quickly. But it's mostly those. I think the No One Dies Alone really affects kind of like those other floors, telemetry and med surg and things that they don't necessarily experience death as much. But throughout this time, I always felt that there's something a little off about the No One Dies Alone. And I want to talk to you about it. So I want to try to keep this in order and just not be free thought, and just going free association all over the place. So I tried to structure this. And so for those of you who don't know, NODA, or No One Dies Alone, or NODA, is now a national program that volunteers, or depending on the institution's way of setting it up, that when no one's dying alone, or someone is dying and they're alone and there's no family, especially during non-COVID time, that the NODA would be activated, and a volunteer or someone would come sit and sit with them as they pass away or actively dying. And I've always wondered what's the need? Tony, what do you mean, what's the need? That's the right thing to do. My question is it? Now, I want to say from this point on, I think NODA is a great thing to do based on a series of criteria, though. So I want to just kind of share with you why NODA got started. And so I'll leave the link to the video about the origin from the actual nurse who started NODA. And so for here on out, No One Dies Alone is referred to NODA. So where did it come from? Well, this nurse, Sandra Clark, she was coming on her night shift, and long story short, the patient, the pass off, so the day nurse told her, I have this patient. They're not going to last very long. Just want you to know about it. They'll probably die on your shift. And so as the nurse checked in with the patient and did, handoff, had initial conversations with him, his voice was very faint, but his request to her was just to be with him. So we have a patient who is conscious, who is requesting someone to be with him as he was dying. That's the way I see it, or the way it's described. But being on her shift, that she has several other patients, it sounded like. So she sounded like she had four other patients, it seems like. And evidently, he died on her shift. About an hour after the request, she went into his room and found him passed away with his, as she described, his arm outstretched. Don't know exactly what that means. We don't know what that will mean, but some people can assume that maybe he was reaching out for help. But that could be true, could be not true. So what was the nurse's reaction? The nurse's reaction was anger and frustration. And so Um, and thus NODA was born. She felt like something had to be done to care for these patients who are dying alone. And so it is now basically a national or national program. I don't know officially, but maybe considered best practice, right? But let's relook at this, see if because what is happening now is that anyone who feels uncomfortable and someone that's dying alone, this NODA is enacted and a volunteer or someone is put in place so the person dies alone or won't die alone. Now, again, let me set this criteria of what set this up, of the actual event. We had a patient, a conscious patient, ailing, actively dying, very sick, but conscious, probably fearful, wanted someone to be along his journey as he breathed his last breath. So he was conscious and he made a request. Thus, it became his plan of care. The RN acknowledged to him that it would be difficult to spend with him, acknowledged his request, but told him that she wouldn't be able to fulfill it. So she comes back, she's angry and frustrated, and now wants to address the issue. So now she has these certain feelings. She didn't use these words, but I'm going to take a leap here. Maybe feeling bad, maybe possibly guilty. Something he requested, she wasn't able to be there. I'm using the word guilty. She never used those words. She used angry and frustrated. But without investigating, we don't know where it really comes from. And so she wanted to do something about it. And again, thus NODA is born. But I don't see any national really guidelines about it. But here's the thing that no one is really talking about. Well, let me back up. In the work that we do as clinical chaplains, we are trained in the behavioral sciences. And part of our training is self-awareness, right? And being aware of our own history and our baggage and our own feelings, especially our feelings about what the patient is sharing with us about their own personal story. Now, when they share things with us, they're sharing information that we may not agree with, we may get angry with, we may join with, and so we have all of these feelings. And so in our training, just like in psychological training, we believe that the term for this is when we start feeling these things and expressing these things, it's called countertransference. And when our own beliefs, values, and ideas start being put into play in the visit, that's not a good thing. Now our own issues are coming into the plan of care that the patient's not even requesting or asking to get involved with. So our own issues are getting in the way. So it's what we call countertransference, and many of you should know obviously what that is. And so this is kind of what I see here, is that, now let me break again. I need to break again. It should be NODA in our hospitals, definitely, but under certain guidelines, and we'll talk about that again. So I see this nurse and her own countertransference, and in her anger and frustration, NODA was born. So it came from an emotional state that was non-reflective or unprocessed, I'm assuming. And so that's not a healthy state, an emotional healthy state to start anything. Hold on. Let me read this from you from case law. You've heard the saying that hard cases make bad law. The original meaning of the phrase concerned cases in which the law had a hard impact on some person whose situation aroused sympathy. Hard cases make bad law. We'll leave that there for a second, right? So I think this NODA, I think has good intentions, and with certain guidelines is actually a good thing. But I think this national thing without any reflective process or understanding of what is happening here is considered bad law. Under what my experience is and how it's deployed, and have other colleagues and their use of it. Well, Tony, what are you talking about? That how can this be a bad thing? How can this be a bad thing? No, again, it's not a bad thing, but I think what is developed into it's from a place of anxiety. It's not coming from a healthy place, right? So, many of us who've done this work and have experienced death, with hospice or even the hospitals, we actually know, or we don't know because the patient has passed away, and verbally people have said in small cases when they're conscious that people don't die until the room is clear and there's no one there. So we have enough evidence to know that some people want to die alone. Boom. So any of you who've done this long enough, who've cared, maybe some palliative care nurses and chaplains, we've acknowledged when family has left, they die. Because a lot of times family creates anxiety in the room and they're all tense and they're not relaxed. So some people want to die alone. Now, have we ever thought about that? Right? So we could be forcing something on a patient that they don't even want. Never thought about this, have you? Right? I've even had a clinical supervisor, you may agree or not agree, but there may be some merit to it, that one even said, it is unethical to pray for someone who's unconscious at their bedside is unethical without their consent. They're unable to consent to the prayer. And that's unethical. Some people say, it's a little extreme. But what if we don't know the patient or what have you, maybe they're not friendly with religion. And if they were to come back and say, you prayed for me, and I didn't like it, and it would tick them off. See, not all of our care is consensual, isn't it? Everything that we do. We won't even do a surgery or a procedure without them signing their name to consent to it. So now we're going to provide some care without their consent because they're unconscious, they're unaware. So those are some things to think about. Again, I'm not saying NODA is not something that we should not do, but I think there should be some guidelines. And let me start talking about those guidelines. Well, let me back up a little bit. I think before any NODA or anyone who is dispatched or deployed to a patient, the nurse needs to be cared for. Life is messy. It really is. People die. People die alone. And that's just life. whether in a hospital or anywhere else, and it sucks. So I think before anyone is deployed, I think the nurse who wants it needs to be cared for. What is it about this patient that maybe from others that she did not request no one dies alone? Right? Did this person remind them of a family member? Did it remember of their mom or dad or grandpa or uncle or brother or sister or a daughter or a son? And they are troubled. So again, this is the request for NODA is a place of anxiety from the nurse. And it's the nurse's need, not the patient's need. Does that make sense? So think number one, I think that the nurse needs to be cared for when they have a request for no one dies alone or a companion to care for that person. And so here, what are some guidelines? And I think when the person is conscious, and who knows, this might be too much, but especially during COVID-19 or whatever, I wonder if an additional question is asked. And I think some guidelines, or let me back up. I think if there's been no family member, perhaps there's been family who came and maybe they're from out of town and they came in and expected the patient to die, but they never died, but they had to leave, they had to get back to work. But they said their goodbyes, and the patient may have said their goodbyes, and now they're unconscious. But we just feel uncomfortable. Is that a reason for NODA? I don't know. I think that's something that each institution needs to consider, as long as it's coming from a healthy place and not an unhealthy place. So we need to put a criteria. Is it someone, family members came in, said their goodbyes. And again, this is a little different, an hour or 2 or 3 hours go by and they're living longer than what was expected. Do we deploy a companion? I don't know. All right. So I'm wondering when we go back to maybe when they're conscious, and I don't even know when a right place, if this is even appropriate. I don't know, to say, if you were to be alone in the hospital and you were dying, see, this is even uncomfortable saying it, right? Would you want someone by your side? Would you want a stranger by your side? Would you like a volunteer to be by your side as you pass away? Right? They may say yes or no. Now that's kind of awkward, because most of this NODA is it's unexpected. ICUs, they really, when they're serious, they know they're going to die, and so the ones that are going to die, or they know they're going to, really not a whole big issue. Again, it's on those other floors where they don't experience death, and they didn't go on palliative care or something. Families just refusing, and they never took them home for some reason. And that's another thing. How prevalent is the need, as well, the circumstances? Who knows? But anyways, I think we need to put guidelines in, and that the institution deploys the NODA companion in a healthy state, that the institution is not the institution itself is not acting out in anxiety, but in a well thought out process. And I think mainly one is checking on the nurse. That is, is there any what's the countertransference, the issues that may be at stake? And again, for the clinical chaplain, this is great staff care opportunity. Help them process the distress that they're having while they're trying to care for other patients, and knowing that there's someone dying in the other room, and they can't be there. And so that's number one. Number two, you really need to think about, or our own beliefs and values getting in the way, because maybe they don't want someone in their room when they die. And how are you going to determine that? Right? Again, it's care without consent. And how long? How long do you want someone to sit there? Some use employees or on modified duty, or or a float pool. You're going to pay them 3-4 hours of sitting there. When you deploy them, when you know that death is imminent within an hour or two. Now we all know we don't know when someone dies, but through experience, most of us know that death is imminent, probably won't last based on their vitals. We know that they won't last very long. And that's another thing. How long do you deploy them? I'm a leader of chaplains. I don't want to pay a chaplain 2 hours of time sitting with an unconscious patient who I don't know really wants us there, while there's other distressed patients who need our care as well. It's hard, right? This is life. These are hard decisions. And again, that's why most of them probably used volunteer services to do that as well. And so just a current issue that I wanted to bring before you about No One Dies Alone. Some of those questions that I asked, probably you haven't thought about before. The consent to be in their room, to whether they even want someone. Someone may want to die alone, but we're forcing our beliefs and values on them. And we know in our training, that's a no-no, right? So, hey, I'm going to put the YouTube video of the nurse. When I'm done with this, I'll put it in the line here for you. Subscribe and make a comment. I think this would be a lively discussion about the degree in which we use NODA. I know I tried to find her contact information to kind of get a little bit more background on her decision for certain things, but unsuccessful. So, man, I look forward to some comments. Right now, as I end, I'm not saying not to do NODA. I think it is appropriate in the right situations, especially when a conscious patient makes the request saying, hey, I don't want to do this by myself, and I would like to have someone here. But I think this takes a committee and maybe some ethicists, maybe not to that degree, but it needs to be processed. The guidelines of a program need to be more reflective and more thought out. And hopefully with you clinical chaplains, I hope you're trained enough to understand these ideas and issues to bring up before your administrators or other directors. We need to step up our game. So think about it. Make some comments. Let's fire this up. All right. Take care. Happy clinical chaplain work. All right. Take care.